Hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. And my name is Monica. I am founder and CEO at WebGentle. We have our speaker Rodney with us, the Jira guy, who will explain some great tips and tricks for the Jira admins. And I am pretty sure like this webinar will be very beneficial for the Jira admins. Now I am going to hand over this webinar to the Rodney. Rodney, it's over to you now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Let me
you.
just share my screen. Let me know when you guys can see it.
Yeah, we can.
All right. So as Monica said, my name is Rodney Nissen. I am a Jira admin and consultant at Coyote Creek Consulting. I currently hold 3 certifications listed here, but I am currently working on my 4th for my Atlassian Certified Master status. For those of you who don't know, if you get 4 of their certifications, you get that status, which I'm very much looking forward to. But probably the reason I'm here, and as Monica said, I am the author of the Jira Guide blog, where we post weekly tips, tricks, and how-tos for you to get the most out of your tool set. So the first piece of advice, the kind of thought here is what you need to do when you're first getting started. Let's say you just dropped the box on your desk and says, here, you're now the Jira admin, or you got your first job as Jira admin, or maybe you're just starting a new job as a Jira administrator. What do you need to do? Well, my first piece of advice, first step is, in the great words of Douglas Adams, don't panic. It doesn't really help to panic. You start getting in these cycles of thoughts that are not really too helpful to you, and you just end up making yourself more worried than you have to be. Just breathe, take a second, take it all in, and start making a plan. The idea here is this is going to be your plan. So now that we got that done, I'm going to make a couple assumptions here. In this case, you are likely the only Jira admin, which means you don't get a lot of clues about why decisions were made in the past, or if they were even made with any sort of conscious choice. And you're also likely starting with an unmanaged instance, sometimes called the Wild West. Things were added to the instance like workflows, permission schemes, whatever, without much thought of how it would affect the overall instance. And you tend to find a lot of things where each project has its own workflow scheme, its own permission scheme, its own screen scheme, its own set of custom fields. And you can even find examples where multiple custom fields share the same name. Usually when you're starting with an unmanaged instance, you got a lot of cleanup work ahead of you, but we'll start to look at that. So moving forward, a lot of us don't get this opportunity. Some of us are just dropped a Jira instance on your desk. This is how I started with Atlassian is I applied for another role, and surprise, day one, you're also Jira admin now. But if you do get the chance to interview for the position, this is where I start. I like to have a list of printed questions printed out. This does several things. First thing it does, and probably most important, is you get to get an idea of what you're going into. A job interview is as much about figuring out if the job is right for you as it is figuring out it or making the company aware that you are right for the job. So I have a list of questions printed out. This also shows that you are well prepared, you're coordinated, you have thought about this ahead of time. It generally gives a good impression to have these printed out and ready to go. So my first question, and this is usually the most important going forward because it'll help me plan, is what is your biggest pain point with your current Jira usage? This will let you know what you need to research. If they say, for example, hey, we're having problems with our lag, you could start researching issues with that. It's just a good idea, good ground to figure out what you need to look into going forward. The others are about figuring out what kind of instance it is. Is it a cloud system? Is it a server? Is it on data center? How many teams of users does it support? What are your governing policies? What apps or plugins do you run? Am I replacing another Jira admin, or I'm coming in fresh to this role? It's just about figuring out what you're walking into. So always do that. As I said, use the answers from these questions to form a plan, research the answer problems. Let's say they don't have insight into anything that's going on in the company. You could prepare some docs to deploy into Confluence that talk about JQL, reporting, and dashboards, just as an example. But the idea is if you have a chance to learn a bit about the position ahead, use that to get a plan ready to execute and become prepared. All right, so now day one, you either just got the instance handed to you from another situation or you're day one on the job. Usually there's a whole lot of pantry if you're starting a new position with getting documents signed, make sure everything's set up correctly, all that. But once you're down at your desk, the first thing you need to do is make sure that your admin permissions are set on Jira. Make sure your system admin specifically so you can get to all the workflows, all the settings you need to. If you're running a server or data center instance, also make sure you can access every node of your instance and any dependent resources like databases and file shares. In the case where you're not managing that, you're dependent on another team to manage the database or file share, get a contact name for that. Make sure you have someone that if something is wrong, you know who to talk to. And while you're looking over all these resources and everything, start writing your docs. Your documentation is going to help you at the end of the day. Keep in mind and remember all the details that you ordinarily won't remember yourself. So you're already sitting there researching all this stuff, getting all this information together. Now is the time to start writing that out so you can remember it long term. So figure out who is you. Okay, so next is figure out who is using your instance. There's a JQL here where it just simply shows every issue ordered by last time it was touched, so last time it was updated. So put that in and then start taking note of what the active projects are and what the active users are. Who is the people who last made these changes? If you find a bunch of changes that take place in a short time period, that might be evidence of a bulk edit. Figure out who are doing those bulk edits and get those on your side. Anyone in Jira savvy enough to do a bulk edit is generally a power user and someone you want on your side, because they'll give you all the dirty things that have been going on before you got there that management may not even be aware of. So definitely find out, try and find those evidence of bulk edits if you can, but just figure out who is using the instance. Who are your main customers? If you have time left in day one, because day one is usually a busy day, start making plans to meet with those teams you found in your Jira instance. As I said, management may not always be aware of all the problems, but your teams will be. So getting them on site, getting that information from them will be paramount to your long-term success, but it also shows those teams that you're willing to work with them to make their lives easier. So it's important to get to know the teams working on your instance as soon as possible. So day one's theme was getting to know your instance. Day two is about taking control. So with unmanaged instances, you often run into a situation where more than one person is admin. And in fact, you may have whole teams of people with admin permissions. This is not ideal because any change you make, they could just go in and undo if they don't like it or they think it should be done better. I'm not saying don't take their information into account. As I said, talk to your teams, figure out what they're doing, figure out what is going on there, but you were brought in to manage this instance. You need to be the one who's managing it, not let everyone else manage it for you. Otherwise, you're going to get nowhere when you go to do cleanup. So for everyone you find who does have admin permissions, start asking some basic questions. Why do they need admin permissions? Is it something that they weren't able to do that no one has an idea of how to fix the permissions for? Or is it just no one was taking charge so someone had to? Figure out why that is, and that'll give you a lot of clues as to how to handle each individual case. And define a admin team. You don't want to be the only admin on your instance. I mean, if you enjoy getting calls on your vacation, go for it, but I personally don't, so I like to deploy a team. Usually, even if your team is not Jira admins, they're a good place to start because that gets it controlled under one group. And it also allows you a chance to cross-train, so maybe they can become Jira admins to help you out with some of the lighter work. So as I said, my immediate team is usually my first bet, but that's not the case for every org. It's up for you to define who your admin team is and how they work. And again, the whole point here is having the admin team is anyone outside the admin team needs to have a very, very good reason to be an admin. So part two of taking control is, well, let's say you find someone as an admin and they're a VP in the company. They very much outrank you. If they wanted to, they could just say, no, you're doing it this way. How do you deal with those people? Well, first thing I do is figure out why they need admin. Is it a reasonable need? Is it something they're wanting to do? Is it something that would pose a risk to the full instance if they were allowed to do it unchecked? And most importantly, does it have a permission node? If it does have a permission node, it's something you don't think is a risk and it's reasonable for them to be able to do. Create a group for it, assign permissions to that group, and then assign that particular user to the group. They still get to do what they need to do, but they don't have keys to the kingdom. If it's no, here's where you'll get to negotiating. You have to explain to them calmly, collectively, why this is a problem. Don't bring emotions into it because that's going to shut them down instantly and you're not going to get anywhere. Just explain to them, here's what could happen if this is left unchecked. This is why I need to manage this process. But if you need to get this done, I am here for you. Just submit a ticket. We'll get it done as soon as we can. Let them know that this is your job and you're here to manage it, but you're here to enable them to work. And usually they'll get a positive response to, okay, that's reasonable. So 2 days down, day 3, we start planning how we're going to clean up an instance. Again, we're assuming here that it's an instance that has been unmanaged, so there's going to be a lot of cleanup to do. So first step is figure out what we have going on, how many different schemes, how many custom fields there are, how many of this stuff is not being used even. So go through, do your analysis there, figure out what's all going on. If just to plug an app here, there's a free app called Power Admin from Botron. It's excellent in figuring out where all these things are being used and if they're being used. So definitely use that if you can. Going forward, if you see any unused workflows, these are usually very easy targets for an early removal. They're not seen by end users. They're completely, the only place you can find them is in the admin console. So if you remove them, your users are really not going to notice anything. But having them even unused in Jira does take up load. And because of that load, Jira does notice that these things are still there. So if you need an early step to clean up, that's usually where I start. You could plan a long-term, organize workflows, clean them up, create standard set of workflows, all that, but just getting started, this is a good place to get started, and it does make a difference in your Jira instance. Further cleanup planning. Permission schemes are another place I look at as an early place. It'll take you a little bit of negotiation because you got to understand why the permissions set the way they are, the nature of your company, how private individual teams tend to be. But generally, I could find that permission schemes follow one of 4 categories. First being everyone could see, modify, work on, and create issues. Is a completely open project. Anyone could come in, do work. Permissions are not really needed. Second one is everyone can see and create issues, but only the team can work and modify on the issues. This is for a team that's like a submission queue, where requests are coming into them and they work on them and put out some sort of output. Third one is everyone can see the issues, but the only team to create, modify, and work on issues. This permission scheme personally is my favorite because it's open. It allows teams to see what you're doing, but not interfere with what you're doing. You are still in control of your own destiny here. And then we've got our most private setting where only the team could see the project, create issues, modify issues, or work on issues. This is for your hush-hush top secret kind of projects. I said I don't like this kind of closed nature because it kind of creates a clickiness at work where people don't really work together so much as work against each other. So I don't encourage this, but there are times it is needed. So I do have it as an option, and you do to see it in the wild every now and again. All right. So day 4, day 3, we figured out our schemes. We started getting a plan together towards cleaning up. Day 4 is kind of continuing that theme with figuring out what projects may need to be archived. So to do this, first thing I do is review the JQL from day 1. Then I start scrolling on down the list till I get to issues that haven't been updated in a month. And then I start looking for themes. Is there a project that hasn't been touched within a month? Is there a group of people that haven't really been seen within a month? Start digging down and figuring out what projects are not being used. Don't assume just because they're not being used, no, you could just archive them right away. Usually there's some digging to be done. Sometimes the project isn't being used because the team felt they were getting nowhere. It was too hard to use. Essentially, the project was misconfigured for the team. So talk to that team. Figure out, hey, you created this Jira project. Why aren't you using it? Figure out what the pain point was, and if it's something to be fixed, make a plan to fix it. Again, it's all about creating that dialogue with the team and figuring out what's going on with them and encourage them. Let them know that you're there to fix their issues. You're there to be their ally. That's the biggest point here is you're coming into a new group. You need to let people know that you're competent, but you're also willing to help. There will be plenty of chances to say no in the future, but in the meantime, listen, learn, figure out what their pain is, and figure out if it's something you can fix. So sometimes when you're doing this, you're going to run into people who just feel that Jira sucks. Jira is no good, is a terrible system. I hate Jira. It comes in a number of flavors, but people who absolutely despise Jira. How do you work with these people? Well, my first step is to just agree with them. I think as Jira admins, we've all been on instances where Jira sucks. I personally am the worst Jira user. I have to force myself to use Jira myself, even though I do use it actively for my projects. But sometimes these Jira sucks for reasons that you can help. So ask them what they don't like about it specifically. Figure out what their gripes are. Then show them how you could change settings to address those concerns. Oh, there's too many fields. Well, I could change the field screen. I could change the amount of required fields. I could do this. I could do that. I could change the presentation of the fields so only the fields you care about show up when you care about them. And all this stuff that's extra goes on other tabs. Show them that you're able to listen to their concerns, and more importantly, you're willing to show them that you're willing to make a change to make it more palatable for them. Don't forget that overall you're in charge of the entire instance and having too many schemes and all, but this will give you an idea of how to form those schemes long term, so when you do this consolidation, you're taking everyone's input into consideration. But as said, the 3 points here: show them you're willing to listen, show them you can fix it, and show them how you plan to fix it. And if you do those 3 things, they'll likely at least give you a chance. Say, this person knows what he's talking about, he's hearing me, he knows I'm having a problem with it, let me see what he can do, and let's give it another try. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you have people that are just completely intractable, but this will work 9 times out of 10 to get people on your side, at least to give you a chance. So day 4, you've got your cleanup planned. You're still continuing your meetings with teams because that's happening all throughout the week, but you've kind of got an idea what's going on. You kind of got an idea of the workload that's ahead of you. Day 5 is about preparing for the unexpected. Whether we like it or not, the system is going to go down. The system's going to have problems. These things happen. That's just the nature of working IT these days. So take the time now to prepare a runbook. Your runbook is basically your plan for what to do when things aren't working right, things are down. It is generally meant for junior admins or people who are otherwise unfamiliar with Jira to give them something to follow before contacting you, so you're not called right away. Sometimes it can even prevent you by being called because it has instructions for them to fix whatever's going on. Typically, your runbook contains what checks to perform to be sure Jira is down. One moment. Jira is down rather than having a network problem. Information on all the services that support Jira, the database, file system, the proxy, how to check that those are working correctly and reachable from each node. Basic troubleshooting steps, things that help you figure out what may be going on. The backup procedure and location backup. So if there's backup that needs to be taken or backup that needs to be restored, they at least have that information. Though before backup restored, they should definitely contact you. That should be clear in the documentation. Logs to capture if a problem is detected. That way you get in those logs in a timely manner. If it gets escalated to you, you already have those logs, you can submit them to Atlassian or whatever vendors need it. It generally saves time if the method to capture those logs is included in the runbook. And finally, contact information should things need to be escalated to you. Typically cell phone, if you have a work cell phone, that, but if you have personal cell phone, that, email address, just how to get a hold of you should the runbook not be able to solve the issue. So the runbook won't stop every call, but at least get the ball rolling. So if you need to be called in, certain things have already been done first, so it's better than nothing. So 5 days, we've got introduced to our team, our instance. We figured out who's using what. We've started planning for cleanup. We've got a runbook in place. It's now our first weekend. Congratulations, you survived. But as a reminder here, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with but one step. This is going to be a long-term process. We've got a great start here. We've shown our teams we're willing to work with them, but enjoy your 2 days off because next Monday you're going to get right back on it. All right, so some quick contact information before we get into it. Of course, you can visit my website and blog at thejiraguy.com. Email, I'm rnissen@thejiraguy. Twitter, I'm @thejiraguy. Facebook, you contact me at facebook.com/thejiraguy. And LinkedIn, being the odd one out, is LinkedIn/in/rgnissen. So that being said, do we have any questions?
Yeah, Rodney, we have few questions. Question number 1 is, are there any audit logs for the cloud instance aside from seeing the last time a user accessed the instance?
It depends what you mean by audit log. Within Jira, there is a somewhat limited audit log included. This is to show you pretty much what admin made the last change, what changes were made to projects, etc. It's very limited, but it's something Atlassian is working on. But as far as a user audit log, pretty much what you stated is unfortunately what we have at the moment in cloud.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question. Someone wants to confirm, like, what is the plugin name you just quoted? And this is Power Admin or what? I think that was the Power Admin, right?
Correct. It was Power Admin. It's by a company called Botron. I actually have a full review of the plugin on the blog that you can review. It's one of my favorites out there because it just fundamentally changed one aspect of what I do, which is analysis of an instance. For example, you need to know, where is this custom field used? Before that was an all-day analysis because I have to go to every workflow. I'd have to find filters that used it. It was, and even then I'd miss stuff, but this does that kind of analysis for you very easily. So it's now one of my favorites.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the another question is there any alternative to Power Admin that you mentioned for Jira Cloud? Is there any alternative is available to Power Admin?
Unfortunately, as of right now, there's not. Using the new Atlassian Forge, which is in beta, which is a new framework for plugin or apps in the cloud, Botron is working on getting this functionality available, but currently there's not really anything else that does this in Jira Cloud.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And the another one is, does anyone have a template of a runbook that can be shared, or any document on the troubleshooting steps would be great.
Certainly, I don't have anything specific to Jira prepared that I'm able to share.
Mhm.
Runbook tends to contain a lot of sensitive information, so it's not something you necessarily share publicly. But I do have a generic template that I've linked to on the blog post corresponding with this presentation.
Mhm.
I'd be happy to send out a link to that blog post. It gives you a basic template to get started with, but um, you know, that's not a bad idea. I may look at that going forward, preparing a kind of generic Jira run book for cloud and server.
Yeah, it would be great for the people. Yeah. And we have the another one, like, do we have any limitation while doing migration from cloud to cloud? Power admin is only for cloud, or it is there for server and the data center as well?
Um, as I mentioned before, unfortunately, as of right now, Power Admin is only available for server and data center. There's not really anything for that. As
Mhm.
far as a cloud to cloud migration, I'm going to be honest, migrations are a tough topic.
Yeah,
My
it's
first
truly, yeah.
I could do a full presentation alone on migration policies and how to do that. And then
Mhm.
I could break that down further into cloud to cloud, cloud to server, server to cloud, server to server. Um, as I said, I'm not sure I'd be able to satisfactorily answer that in this short platform, other than check everything, make sure that there's no conflicts in custom fields, make sure there's no conflicts
Yeah.
in workflow names. There's a lot of analysis that goes into migration before you do the actual migration.
Mhm.
And you just need to absolutely check everything and make sure there's no conflicts in there. The hardest time I've always had with migrations is when two things are named the same thing and neither team is willing to compromise.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we are done with all the questions, Rodney. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I would like to mention, like, you can find the recording of this webinar on our official YouTube channel. The channel name is WebGentle, and I have already provided the link into the chat box window. Still, we have 1 or 2 minutes. If the participants have any questions, then please feel free to ask. Yeah, and I would like to say a big thanks to Rotney, who like provides great tips and tricks for the Jira admins. And definitely, if if person performing a new Jira admin roles, then these techniques will help them. Definitely, it will.
Thank you for having me. I very much appreciate being able to speak to you guys today.
Yeah, thank you, Rodney. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.